My mom died quite suddenly and unexpectedly of a hospital infection about 4 months ago. But that, if you can believe it, wasn't the worst thing. Nor was the fact that her younger sister, my aunt, took up with Dad less than 2 months after her death. The worst was yet to come. It started on a dull evening. I just had supper with my aunt and Dad, barely tolerating her bright, friendly chatter about school. I went upstairs to my room as soon as I could to do my homework. I stared at my laptop screen, pretending to look at my assignment, but in reality, I was swimming in grief and missing Mom. I couldn't concentrate on anything since she died. I minimized the assignment tab and looked at the photo I used as background. It was taken a few years ago, a happy family occasion, my mom and aunt sitting side by side, so like yet unlike, my dad next to Mom, and I was leaning against him. All of us were smiling. Mom had both her arms stretched out around her sister and her husband. The chat box in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen began flashing. I was mildly surprised it was an older app that no one really used anymore. I had been meaning to delete it. And then I froze. Mom's little image blinked in the chat box. And then the words popped up. "Hello, Thelma. It's me, Mom." Fear gripped my throat. I knew it must be some hacking thing or stupid error, but I was paralyzed. I turned round and glanced at my bedroom door. It was closed, although the sounds of TV from the living room still came wafting in. Aunt Claudia had the TV on whenever she was downstairs, even if she was not watching it. "Don't be scared, Thelma. It's really me. I found a way to talk to you, my darling precious child. I've been missing you so much. If this was a hacker's joke, it was the cruelest joke in the world." Against my will, tears began welling in my eyes, spilling out. "Oh, my darling, please don't cry. It's okay. And it's no use crying anyway. I need you to save that energy." My fingers still stiff from fear, I managed to type out a response. "Mom? What do you mean? Is that your lie?" I could sense her familiar frustration rushing back through the laptop, same as when she felt I wasn't being smart or strong enough when she was alive. "Of course, Thelma, it's me. And I've come back to tell you something important. I had my own important news to share. Did you know Aunt Claudia moved in last weekend?" "Yes, Thelma. I know. And this is what gave me the strength to come and tell you. Please be strong. I know you are a strong girl, and you can deal with this. I am sorry you have to. But you have to know. I have to tell you. She can't have everything my life. Man, house, child. A different kind of fear took over me. Mom, what do you mean?" "Thelma, I'm sorry to put this on you like this. I don't know what else to do. You have to know. Aunt Claudia murdered me. The bottom of my world gave way as I dropped into a dark hole of dread and fear. I felt as if I had known this all along, all through the past 4 months, ever since that awful night when Aunt Claudia called from the hospital, where she worked, to talk to Dad. I just couldn't say it. Thelma, are you listening to me? If I had any doubts that the laptop chat was really my mom, those words dispelled them. I heard them in the exact voice. She always used to say those very words to me. "Yes, Mom. But how?" "She was at the hospital, you know. When I went in, she wasn't on my floor, but it was very easy for her to arrange for me to pick up an infection. Thelma, the door opened and Aunt Claudia poked her head in." I gave a little scream and frantically minimized the chat box. Aunt Claudia stepped forward. "Oh, honey, you look like you've seen a ghost. Are you okay?" Wordlessly, I nodded. Aunt Claudia sighed. "Thelma, sweetheart, I miss your mom too, but this moping isn't doing you any good. It's hurting your dad, you know. Do you want him to suffer more?" I shrugged. I couldn't speak. I looked up at her. The light was out on her face. She looked more like Mom than ever before, but also not. And these clothes, Thelma. She reached out and touched my black sleeve, and I flinched back as though she had hit me. She frowned, and for an instant, I thought she was actually going to slap me. But then she smiled and said, "I know girls your age like to wear black all over, but what do you say me and you have a trip to the mall and pick you up some nice new gear? On me. Come on, sweetheart. It will be so much fun." I shook my head furiously. Tears of rage, grief, and fear splatter out. Aunt Claudia began again, "Oh, Thelma," but then she stopped and went quiet. I looked up at her face. She was pale and had a horrible expression. She was staring at my laptop. I followed her line of sight, turning around to look at my screen. The photo had changed. There was a new photo in background, showing Mom seemingly asleep in a hospital bed, and Aunt Claudia by her side, bent over her. Aunt Claudia seemed to jolt into life. Her face twisted into a terrible snarl. She screamed, "Are you playing tricks on me?" And she lunged towards me. I cringed back in my chair, raising my hands to defend myself against her onslaught. But before she could even touch me, a bolt of electricity sprang out of the laptop, hit her square in the chest, and she dropped dead to the floor. I shrieked in terror. Dad and I had to move from that town. Losing to wives in for months isn't a good look for anyone. Even though the police combed through our statements and the laptop and the electricity up and down, they eventually had to put it down to a freak accident which happened when I asked my aunt for help to get my laptop working. Dad never remarried, and I never heard from Mom again. Story 2. My husband and I had been trying for a baby for the longest time. Yeah, I know you're probably going to laugh at that sentence. I've been married to Matthew for 3 years now. I've been trying to get pregnant for such a long time, but to no avail. My gynecologist told me that due to PCOS, my eggs haven't been able to mature properly, which has made conception more challenging. So when I noticed that I was feeling nauseous and my menstruation blood was nowhere to be seen, I took a test, and it's no surprise that I was happy. I did everything to make sure this baby came out of my womb healthy, and I mean everything. I have no idea where I failed, if it was even my fault. The doctors told me that the baby would be born sick from a congenital heart defect, and its chances of survival were low. They told me to abort it and save myself the trouble of going through the grief of your child dying, and instead deal with the one of losing a fetus. But this wasn't just a fetus to me. This was my child. This might be my only chance to ever truly be a mother, I thought to myself. My mother had always wanted to be a grandmother, and I didn't want to disappoint her. Ever since I was a child, she'd tell me, "Wait until you see how it is to be a mother, and I can't wait for you to give me a grandchild." Well, why can't you just adopt? Some people would ask me, and the answer to that is, I want to raise a child that has my own blood flowing through it. I have nothing against people that decide to adopt, but I just couldn't see myself doing that. Oh, how much I regret that now. Going into labor was one of the most difficult things I've gone through. Some women report not remembering what the pain felt like, or they straight up claim giving birth isn't as bad as some people make it out to be. That was far from the truth for me. I felt as if I was trying to push a rock out of my stomach through an opening that was not meant by nature to have a being that big pass through it. I felt as if I was being broken apart. My entire soul was torn open with a rusty knife with no analgesic and no mercy whatsoever. I decided to go the natural way too, so no C-sections. I really thought I knew better than my doctors who have had experience with women in my position for years and have paid thousands of dollars to get the education they have to be where they are. Please make it stop. It hurts. Those were some of my words. I want to go C-section. Please. I begged them, but to no avail. "I'm sorry, miss, but it's too late for that. Come on, you're almost there. We know you can do it," said one of the medical professionals. I was holding Matt's hand for dear life. I gripped it so tight to the point I knew I was hurting him. If I have to suffer this much, I'm sure he can deal with a little pressure. "Come on, sweetie. I know you can do it. You've come so far," said Mark. I know that he was trying to be supportive, but to me, he was just irritating at that moment. He wasn't the one that was being shredded into millions of pieces. Of course, I didn't want to tell him that because even at my worst, his sensitive butt was just going to be offended to the point where he wouldn't speak to me for days. I couldn't deal with his immaturity now, could I? After I was done birthing that monstrosity of a baby, they let me hold her. It was a baby girl. "Miracle," I said. "Her name is going to be Miracle. Its symbolic name meant a lot to me, and I hope it'll mean a lot to her too. After the countless doctors I had to go to throughout the last 3 years, and the time I was bringing her into this world, which felt like decades, I hope she appreciates her mother." The doctors put her in one of those incubators. I was made very well aware of the situation that she was going to be in and what her chances of survival were. Do you know what it was like when they told me the baby had died after a few hours of fighting for her life? All that effort and suffering, and for what? My heart was mercilessly shattered into countless agonizing shards. I only got to hold her once for a few seconds before she was taken away from me forever. My beautiful Miracle. My baby. I'd opt for childbearing her 100 more times than this. Sometimes I even wondered if someone had physically torn my heart from her chest. Maybe she even did it. I do not know at this point. The doctors were right. I should have just aborted her. I would have spared myself and my entire family so much suffering. I was selfish to think I'd ever be a biological mother. I broke Matt now too, as well as my mother. She arrived at the hospital 10 minutes after her niece had died. She never even got to see her alive. My mother hasn't talked to me after that. She didn't even come to check on me. She probably thinks it's my fault. After we arrived home from the hospital, Matt's been doing his best to not show his sadness and to be strong and supportive, but I know it's there. I know it's there because every night I hear him leaving our bedroom to cry in the living room. I wish I could just go there, hug him and tell him that everything is going to be okay, but I can't. I can't because I'm a mess myself, physically and emotionally, and I'm the reason he's there bailing his eyes out. It hurts so much to know what a horrible wife I've been. The funeral was a complete mess. I saw so many people crying there. The bastards didn't even know my child. They'd never even seen her, and yet they were shedding tears as if their child had died and not mine. It was a disgrace. It was impressive even. Their crocodile tears are unquestionable proof that if they'd pursued the media, they would have become successful and famous in a quick time. So many of them were like, "I'm so sorry," and "I'm here for you," as if that were true. You know who didn't shed a single drop of tear? Me. Do you know why? Because I had other plans. Maybe I can't bring my child back, but what I can do is make a doll. In the funeral home, I demanded that they leave me alone with my child. They were highly against that, as me being alone would be too emotionally distressing for me. They were right. So many mothers complain because their children cry too much. What about my baby that's never going to let another sound come out of her mouth ever again? They are so ungrateful. They don't deserve their children. They don't know what it's like to lose a child. To lose a part of your soul. Part of my soul that I was going to bring back soon. When my baby was born, there was hair on her head. This is something that doesn't happen often, but I was fortunate enough as this gave me the chance to cut a little bit of her hair. Hair that I was going to put in the custom reborn I had ordered the day my baby was pronounced dead. Maybe the doll can't call me mama or cry, or even move, but it was all that I had left. What else was I supposed to do? I can't just give birth to another child, and I still don't want to adopt. I can't get pregnant anyway, and plus, I can't bear having it in my stomach, then going through the hell of giving birth to it just for it to die a few hours afterward. I paid $16,999 for that doll. Keep in mind that was all the money I had saved up since being together with Matt. If my husband was to leave me, I'd end up homeless, and I have no idea if I'd even be able to keep working at the office I'm at right now. I hadn't waited for a package like ever since I was a child. I couldn't sleep, and the day of the estimated arrival I woke up at a.m. I waited for a few more hours until I saw the man arrive with my order. I didn't even wait for him to enter our property. The moment I saw him through the window while I was pacing around the room like I was listening to music while I was maladaptive daydreaming, I ran out of the house to reach him. He probably thought I was crazy, getting out of the house, running toward him like a serial killer, but I don't care. I yanked the blue fancy box out of his hands, and I didn't even bother to really observe his facial expression, which I can only assume was pure weirded out. I tore the packaging like a tiger tearing apart its prey, and the delivery guy just left, praying that I don't go after him next in case I didn't get what I was expecting. Luckily for me, the reborn was beyond perfect. It was an exact replica of my deceased child that I wasn't given enough of the opportunity to really appreciate. Its eyes were open, as that was my exact request. Hence, I wanted to be able to stare at its dark hazel eyes for as long as I am walking this very earth. Its hands were so small, and its cheeks were full of adorable. My eyes filled up with tears, but not out of sadness, instead of complete happiness. Now, it's not the time to cry. I thought to myself, you finally have your baby back. Call me crazy all you want. The moment I held the doll in my hands, all of the sadness, pain, and grief faded away. The only thing I wondered is how would Matt react once he saw her. I was scared at this point. I spent a ton of money on her, and I doubt that he'd like that. I guess I'm just going to have to lie to him, as it's my money after all. He has no idea how much or how little I had in the first place. I went on through the entire day just staring deeply into her eyes while I was rocking her, swinging on my rocking chair. That's a funny set of words. When Matt came from work, he was shocked to see me in the living room with a baby in my hands. I guess he was expecting to see me just lying in my bedroom like usual, doing nothing but rotting away, and that is why he didn't even greet me properly and instead just asked, "H honey, W, what are you holding?" I looked at him, pretending I hadn't heard the front door open. "Oh, hey, sweetheart, you're back. This is just a reborn," I said. He approached us, and the look on his face when he saw an exact replica of his daughter was priceless. His eyes widened, and his mouth opened like he had seen a ghost. "A sweetie that looks exactly like our bee baby," he stuttered, clearly freaked out by the figure he was seeing. "I know. I mean, she cost $17,000 for a reason," I said with a smile as I moved my head upwards to look at my husband's gorgeous face. 17,000. What the fuck? You gave $17,000 for? For what, Matt? For our daughter. Sweetie, that isn't our daughter. That's just a doll. We had a rather big argument. I didn't want my baby to wake up because of him, so I just straight up ran to our bedroom, silently crying. I knew that he wouldn't understand. He barely ever does. I heard him leave through the front door. I wonder where he was going this time. I tried calling my mom for some emotional support, or I have no idea what, but my calls were never answered. I wonder why. A few days had gone by, and nothing was heard from either my mum nor my husband. That is until I heard that on the news there were two car accidents. Two vehicles collided in a dramatic crash at the intersection of Willow Street and Pine Avenue, a serene locale in the heart of Oakwood Heights. The incident took a sinister turn as investigators discovered the numbers 16999 scrawled in blood on the road near the wreckage, raising suspicions of foul play. Tragically, both vehicles erupted in flames, resulting in the horrific deaths of the occupants, leaving the community in shock. Authorities are now urgently probing whether this was a deliberate act, leaving the town with unsettling questions about a potentially larger, more sinister motive behind the incident. I looked down at the doll in my hands again. There was a smile on its face. It did not arrive that way. Story 3. My friend and I have known each other since high school. We ended up going to the same college. We moved to the same neighborhood and started working at the same place. It was all coincidental, but it allowed us to be close friends, even though we had nothing in common but life and coincidences. At one point, about 4 years ago, she changed jobs. First, we had regular lunches, but then I also moved out of the neighborhood and into a house in the suburbs. So without daily interactions at work, without living close to each other, we just drifted apart. For a few years, we only talked on birthdays and major holidays, wishing each other well, updating each other on random life events, etc. This year, for my birthday, she wrote me and told me she's buying a house. Again, coincidentally, it was very close to where I had moved, about 10 minutes drive. She invited me to her new house party and then messaged me after thanking me for coming. A few days later, she messaged me again, and soon after, we started getting back in touch. As this was happening in mid-June, and with summer just around the corner, we didn't have time to see each other again before I went on holiday. But we were texting each other daily almost. She told me she got a cat and sent me pictures. It was a gorgeous little rescue. She was black all over, except for her paws, which were white. It looked like she was wearing shoes, so my friend named her Boots. From the pictures and videos, Boots was loving, cuddly, and sweet. So, when I came back from holiday, I didn't think twice before I agreed to stop by my friend's house every evening and look after the cat while she went on holiday for a week too. I even proposed to take her over at my place, but since I had a dog and my friend didn't know how Boots would react, we agreed that I'd just drop by every night for a few hours, as my schedule allowed it. As her flight was departing before mine would have landed, we didn't manage to meet, and she couldn't give me her house keys, so she gave me the code to her garage. I could very easily enter like that, and the job was simple enough. Check that the cat had sufficient dry food available, feed her a little satchel of wet food every evening, change her water, and clean her litter. I was also to spend an hour or so just cuddling or playing with her. Simple and adorable, right? Wrong. The first night went smoothly enough. I got there at around 8:30, around Boots' dinner time. She ate her wet food really well, and then we played for a while. "What's your favorite toy, Boots?" I asked her jokingly. She looked me in the eyes, ran into the bedroom, and came back with an orange plastic mouse. I was taken aback by the cat's ability to understand my question, but I assumed my friend was talking to her all the time, and the phrase, favorite toy, in relation to that specific mouse had come by a few times. The cat was associating. I replaced the water and the dry food, cleaned the litter box, and then lay down on her couch to read a little. Boots came over and started making biscuits on the blanket, which I used as a cover. I took some pictures and sent them to my friend, who was pleased with my service. Boots, loving all the attention, ear scratches, and sweet talk, laid on my stomach and started purring, fast asleep. Oof, Boots, what's this smell? I said, trying to dissipate the odor with my hand. What a farty butthole you have, miss. Very unbecoming for a lady, I argued. The cat meowed at me, as if to excuse herself or protest, and then got off the couch. Oh, come on, Bootsy. I didn't mean it, I argued back. I put my book down and checked the time. It was well past p.m. Pretty late, I thought. I packed my things, messaged my friend that I was on my way, made sure the garage door closed properly, and off I went. The next night, things went just as smoothly, with a very similar routine: little food, little play, some chilling on the couch. Boots again came to lie down on my chest. And again, that god-awful smell. What is this? I reacted, trying to grab the cat and bring her closer to my nose to see where exactly it was coming from. I didn't know whether cats needed their anal glands checked like dogs did, but I was guessing this one might. But Boots, as elusive as any cat, ran away again, meowing at me from across the room. Fine, miss. I have to go anyway, I responded. The third night is when things got weird. That terrible smell hit me as soon as I entered the house. Oof, I exclaimed and quickly texted my friend to see whether it was okay to stop the wet food. It smelled strongly of sulfur, like when my French bulldog eats cheese. Something needed to be done, I'd argued in the texts. This poor cat's stomach needed some sort of managing. My friend asked me if the poop is okay in the littler box, and sure enough, it was. She suggested I reduce the portion, but not worry too much about it. Apparently, Boots can get a little gassy when stressed. I just opened the windows to air the place a little, making sure that Boots didn't attempt to escape. Then I proceeded to do the regular stuff, change the water, top up her dry food, and then went to lounge on the couch. This time, Boots didn't join me. Instead, she stood across the room from me and just stared. For the whole time I was there, she just stared, her piercing green eyes never blinking. I felt the need to end my evening short, so at 5 minutes after 10, I bid Boots adieu and left. The whole way home, I kept thinking of the eerie feeling of Boots and me sitting in the darkness, her staring me down, and me trying and failing to read. I wanted to check with my friend, but I didn't know how to put it in words. Your cat is creepy and stinks just sounded like a terrible thing to say to a pet owner. The next night, I got to the house. The place was completely dark, even though I always left the light in the staircase leading from the garage to upstairs, as well as the hallway light upstairs on. My first thought was that the fuse box tripped, but when I flipped the light switch, it worked just fine. Strange, I thought. Not minding it too much, I went upstairs and tended to the cat's business. I also opened the windows as the sulfur smell persisted. This time, Boots did not greet me at the door. Instead, she was on the opposite side of the house, at the bottom of the stairs that led to the attic. Bootsy, dinner. I called at her, but she just stared back. Boots, come here. I tried again, walking towards her. As I started approaching her, Boots made her way up towards the attic. I didn't feel the need to follow her. All right, you know where your food is. You'll find me on the couch, I yelled from the bottom of the stairs. The house also felt unnaturally cold. I went to check the thermostat, and sure enough, it dropped a few degrees. I texted my friend, who just told me not to worry about it. I shrugged and went to the bedroom to look for a thicker blanket or duvet for myself in her wardrobe. As I was snooping around, I heard something right above me. My heart stopped. It sounded like tiny footsteps. Then I remembered that it was probably in the attic, and that's Boots walking around, maybe chasing a rat or two. I know cats are supposed to be fantastic at being quiet and light on their feet, but Boots was a bit on the heavy side, and well, cats these days just don't have the same instincts as before, I assumed. After finding a proper duvet, I made myself a hot tea and cuddled with a book on the couch. About 20 minutes later, Boots came back downstairs, moving around the couch. "Come on, silly goose. I'm sorry I called you a stinky poo," I said, looking at her. As if on command, she jumped up, and I noticed something in her mouth. "What's that, Bootsy?" I asked her, trying to get closer to her. "What do you have there?" Now, I know you all cat owners anticipated what's coming next, but I did not expect it. Boots came slowly closer, and as I stretched out my hand, she placed a dead rat in it. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but the instant the realization hit me, I yelped so loudly and shuddered so violently that I yeeted the rat all the way across the room. Lo and behold, the little shit wasn't dead, just stunned. The moment it hit the floor, it snapped awake and bolted. Boots followed in its tracks, but this time the rat was too fast and the cat couldn't quite catch it. It seemed like there was a rat hole in the kitchen somewhere, and it managed to make its great escape. At least for now. I texted my friend the whole incident, suggesting that she might want to look for the hole and cover it up. Again, she replied, telling me simply not to worry about it. Well, if she wasn't concerned, I sure wouldn't be. In the meantime, Boots proceeded to eat her wet food, and I went back to my book. After dinner, she came back to the couch and cuddled at my feet. The sulfur smell did not seem to leave her. 3 more days and Mommy's home, I told her, feeling bad for how stressful this must be for her to make her so gassy. She turned around and looked at me with her piercing green eyes, and just then I heard some more footsteps above us. Boots got startled and her pupils dilated to the point the green in her eyes was a mere thin outline for the black pupils. Freaking rats, I told myself, but I knew better. Those were too heavy to be rat footsteps. I felt a strong urge to get out, and I checked the time. "Oh my, it's almost 12, Bootsy. I must leave you," I said to her, grabbing my things in a rush. As I was walking towards the stairs that lead to the garage, I could hear the stomping tracing my steps from above, so I rushed for the door, feeling immensely relieved once outside. The next night, I contemplated whether I should be going or not for a long time, but I couldn't not go. It didn't seem fair neither to the cat nor to my friend whom I'd promised. So I decided to reach a compromise with myself. Go, feed the cat, clean the litter, replace the water, and leave. Then, on Saturday, I could afford to go during daytime, and maybe that would feel less eerie, and I could play with her for a longer time to make up for this day. So I did exactly that, or attempted to at least. I got there. Boots was waiting for me, like the first few nights. "Hi, baby girl," I said as she rubbed herself against my legs and purred. "I'm sorry, but this will be a short visit. This time, the footsteps started very early into my visit. Get in, feed cat. Get out, I told myself. Stomp, stomp. I could hear above me as I was preparing Boots' dinner. My fingers were shaking and I could feel my pulse increasing. Stomp, stomp. "Here you go," I said, placing the food bowl down and trying my hardest to ignore whatever was going on in the attic. I went to the bathroom to clean the litter, and the footsteps followed above me. Stomp, stomp. I went back to the kitchen to check if Boots had finished her food and to replace her water, but this time the footprints didn't follow. Instead, they seemed to be going in the opposite direction, towards the stairs. This couldn't be good. My brain was trying to get me to move towards the stairs that lead to the garage, but my gut feeling was telling me to look for Salt. Stomp, stomp, I could hear still, further in the distance. I started opening cupboards and searching frantically for anything plain salt, salt and pepper shaker, bag of salt, anything. I found a Himalayan salt grinder and started grinding it on the counter. God, I hoped it would be good enough. The stomping stopped. I, too, stopped grinding and held my breath so that I wouldn't disturb the stillness and soundlessness that fell upon the house. Creak, creak. I shuddered. The steps were coming down the stairs. I had no doubt about it. I dragged whatever salt I could grind in my palm and made a run for the stairs, keeping my eyes closed at all times. As I reached the door and fumbled to find the doorknob in between squints, I noticed that the light started flickering vigorously. The footsteps were now making their way down the hallway behind me. I started praying and throwing salt over my shoulder. I realized that I didn't know the words to Our Father in English and started crying as I fumbled to remember. Then I started praying in Latin. I knew a little Latin since high school, and surprisingly enough, it came naturally to me. Pater noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum. Stomp, stomp. Adveniat regnum tuum. Fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra. Stomp, stomp. I could hear them picking up the pace, running at me. Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie. Et dimit nobis debita nostra. Stomp, stomp, and then they stopped right behind me. Sicut et nos dimitimus debitoribus nostris. Et ni nos indicas in tentationem. I could feel cold breath down my neck. I could hear faint whispering that I couldn't understand. A witch's cackle in the distance. Est libera nos amalo. Amen. I yelled, finishing my prayer and throwing all the salt I had left behind me. The whispering stopped. The footsteps stopped. The laughter stopped. The house reverted to its natural state of quietness. Every now and then I could hear a car driving by. I could see the headlights gently lighting up the room. I was certain whatever was behind me had vanished. But I never turned around. I never looked. I opened the door to the basement or garage, went downstairs, punched in the garage code, and got outside. Once outside, I ran across the street. I contemplated running all the way home, but I glanced over my shoulder to the house. It seemed fine, dark, quiet. I started sobbing as I called my friend. She didn't reply. I texted her, but still nothing. I stopped going to the house. I figured Boots would only be alone for 2 days at this point, and I left her plenty of dry food. I was too scared of what could happen next. I would just explain it all to my friend, and if she didn't understand, then tough luck. I knew my friend was to land on Sunday at p.m., so I went to the airport and waited for her. "What are you doing here?" she said as soon as she walked through the arrival gates. "Well, I figured you'd need a drive home. Plus, I need to tell you something," I said, relaying the whole story and showing her the photos I'd taken, even the ones I'd sent to her before. She listened quietly, and when I was done, she stopped dead in her tracks, looked me in the eyes, and grabbed my hands. "Do you think I can stay with you tonight?" she asked softly. "What?" I asked, genuinely confused. "You don't want to see if your cat is okay? Andy, these pictures are undeniably from my house, but I don't have a cat," she said, showing me her phone. Our last conversation on her phone was her thanking me for coming to the party months ago. Story 4. My wife has been in an inpatient unit for a few weeks now. It breaks my heart, but we can't currently have her at home. I've been juggling 0 paternity leave, taking care of the baby, taking care of her, and just trying to survive this hard time for my family. I wanted to share her journal entry that staff shared with me in hopes that it may help another family recognize the signs and, more importantly, the risks sooner than I did. February 6, 2024. I'm a new mom, but I don't know where my baby is. I hear Phantom crying at all times of the day and all hours of the night while I lay in a strange bed in this cold and sterile room, unable to sleep. That shrill, incessant, terrible noise constantly claws at my eardrums. I feel the blood seeping slowly out of my ears, and these people keep telling me there's no blood there, but I know they're lying. They're lying directly to my face. They don't care about me. They want to see me suffer. There's no baby to soothe. It's just me here, and my kidnappers who come in sometimes. I want to clamp my hands over my ears as tight as they will go until I can both hear and feel my own heartbeat, but I know nothing can block out the crying. I couldn't cover my ears anyway because they have me chained up. The people who took me are not kind. They are bad, bad people. They poke me and prod me. They leave me here laying in my own filth. They come and clean my bed and then just leave me once again, ignoring my cries and my pleading to please for the love of God let me out. Once in a while, they let me out of my shackles. They chain me back down when I fight back. I managed to get a chunk of hair off of one of them. I didn't see that one again. She was crying when I ripped the stupid hairs from her skull. But why was she crying? She's the one who took me away from my baby. I don't remember when I got here. I can't fathom how they managed to take me. I don't remember my baby's face. I remember my husband, and I hate him. That son of a bitch just stood there and watched as they carted me away while I was screaming and thrashing, attempting to break free. I remember pretty lights as they threw me in the back of their van. The van is where the torture started. They shoved needles into my arms and injected me with things. I blacked out, and when I came to, I was chained to the bed in this unfamiliar room. I spent what felt like days, weeks, months awake, staring at that disgusting brown patch on the ceiling, being driven crazy by the drip, drip, drip of the broken faucet in the corner and the never-ending sound of an inconsolable baby. I just wanted to find that stupid kid and shut it up once and for all. I couldn't listen to another second of that unending crying anymore. I know they're watching me. I can see the cameras they have all around me. I think they're experimenting on me because whenever they come and they inject me with unknown liquids that make me feel funny, that make me feel enraged, that make me lose time, lose memories of what it is they're doing to me. There are other victims here. Sometimes they make us see each other. Some of the others are more calm than I am. They must be the ones who have been here the longest. They're even nice to our assailants. They chat with them and laugh with them, and I don't understand it. Why would you be friendly with these people? We should be working together to find a way out. I decided they must be pretending, so I decided to pretend too. They must be on to something because when I play nice, they're more lenient. Today, they let me have some paper and a pencil, but a dull one, probably anticipating that I may shove it into one of their jugulars at the first opportunity. Not only are they bad people, but they're idiots too. They kidnapped me and thought I wouldn't use this opportunity to tell people the atrocities I'm suffering at their hands. They thought I'd just continue to sit back and take it and tell no one. I called my husband yesterday to tell him how much I hate him. He told me they're just helping me. What an awful man. They're not helping me. He won't help me. I wonder if he ever loved me. I seriously doubt it. I'd never let something like this happen to someone I love. He keeps telling me I might hurt my baby, but I would never do that. I don't know where I am. I am so scared that I will never get out and need to continue to endure this unrelenting torture. I have no hope of getting out. The windows are bolted shut, and there are bars on them, further cementing that this is a prison sentence. This must be a professional criminal organization. They have me. Someone please, please save me. I just want to see my baby. I need to know he's all right. Story 5. For most of my years, I'd been dragged around by the twin steeds of addiction and crime without a thought beyond my next fix. Then I was arrested. That was the wake-up call I needed. Once I was inside, I had to deal with my addiction with both therapy and forced sobriety. It wasn't easy. During my lowest moment, vomiting into a prison toilet, I found something I thought I had lost hope. I came out the other side of my stint healthier and ready to take my life in a new direction. Prison had been the tough love I needed. I was ready for the free world again. I soon discovered the free world wasn't ready for me. Part of my release agreement was that I needed to find steady employment. I thought that sounded simple enough, but I had no idea how cruel the world could be to anyone who colored outside life's lines. Despite being capable, willing, and reformed, no one wanted to hire me. My parole officer told me not to stress because he knew a few people who might be able to help. He saw that I was trying and made a few phone calls. He hooked me up with Pete, a good dude who owned a junk removal company named Moving Buddies. Been out long? He asked when I sat with him. About a month. How did the family take it? Don't have one to lean on anymore, I said. Part of the reason I ended up where I ended up, Yano? I understand, Pete said. We all deal with grief in our own way. Most of those ways don't end in jail time, I said. No, they do not. But it brought you back from the dead and to my doorstep. I'd say that's a win-win. Less than 2 days later, Pete hired me, and I was ready to go. Despite the name, Moving Buddies was not a moving company in the traditional sense. It was a junk removal company that specialized in cleaning up evictions and hoarder homes. It was long, back-breaking work, but it kept me busy. I welcomed the distraction. I wasn't even the only former con on the team. My partner and driver, Devin Baker, or D, as he liked to be called, had also done time in his past. We chatted about it the first day, and it bonded us. Like me, he had gone in for armed robbery, but he had received more time. Like me, he struggled once he got out. He took this job out of desperation too, but he said it saved his life. I mean, don't get me wrong, it sucks, he said as we drove to our new job, but it's better than fucking jail, you know? Plus, Pete's not a bad guy. Tight as a dolphin's asshole with money, but he gets the life. He'll cut you some slack. I was starting to think people like that didn't exist. Nobody loves ex-cons, he said. Wait until you start up with the dating apps. You're gonna really feel the hate then. I laughed. Who'd hate a cuddly teddy bear like you, D? He laughed. That's what I'm saying. But it's cold out there, brother. Ice cold. We were headed out to our gig for the day. Some old fart had passed and left a mess for his kids. I hated hoarder homes because there was always some extra bullshit hidden in the piles. You could not imagine smells. They stick with you hours after your shift. We've found dead pets and living wild animals in some homes. Never a dull moment. We arrived and were greeted by an exhausted-looking man in his late 40s. He was the son of the dead guy and told us what we already knew from the work order. I felt sympathy for him. He inherited a huge mess. Sorry about how it looks. Dad went, well, crazy in the last few years. All he talked about was conspiracies and people out to get him, and he caught himself. He changed, you know. Then he let this place turn into this. Not unusual in our line of work, I said, trying to comfort him. Believe it or not, this isn't even the worst we've ever seen, Dee added. That seemed to ease the man's mind, and he left us to do our work. Dee sidled up to me as he left and nodded at the house. Yo, this is the worst fucking house I've ever seen. Easy, when we finally cracked the tomb's seal, the full brunt of the smell hit us like the concussive wave of an atomic bomb. A potent combination of death, rotting food, and vomit stung our nostrils. Dee wasn't lying, this was the worst ever. Let's have a smoke before we get hip deep in this shit, Dee said, pulling out his vape. Agreed, I said, pulling out my crinkled pack of Marlboro Reds and Naked Lady Bic. Thought'll kill you, man, Dee said, nodding at my pack of cigarettes. Those chemicals won't. Shit, he said, exhaling a massive puff of vapor. I didn't say all that now. We finished our smokes and steadied ourselves. We wiped Vapo Rub under our noses and opened the door. The entryway was crammed with old garbage. The house had so many FLIs that I thought it might get yanked from its foundation and take to the air. The old man may have died, but there was still some life inside this place. Goddamn, Dee said, how did the city not condemn this place? Maybe he knew people in high places. Should have met a garbage man, he said, getting to work. Hoarders were the worst. What they all have in common is some sort of mental break that sets them on this course. I've found it's often associated with some kind of loss, a job, a spouse, a child. They compensate for their loss by trying to save anything that could be important, or that they could use later. They never do. Thus, you get homes stuffed with towering monuments to our disposable culture. The hell? Dee said from a corner of the living room. I walked over to him and looked down at the ground where he was pointing. It's trash, I said. Under the bag, man? I moved the bag and nearly vomited. Under the bag were the remains of two very dead cats. They looked like they'd recently died but were under a few ancient garbage bags. I saw a wrapper for a McDonald's in one bag, and they stopped selling that in the 90s. You didn't know those were cats? I know they're cats. Look at their backs. I did, and that's when I saw what looked like a bite mark on the remains. Something with razor-sharp teeth had chomped some of the spines away. You'd miss it if you quickly glanced at the remains, but when you looked at them, you could clearly see the bite marks. What the hell did that? I asked. That looks like a lion bite, bro, Dee said, shaken up. If we find a lion in here, I'm gone, I joked. It may not be hungry, though, considering he seemed to have recently had a snack. Shit's not funny, Dee said. I have two cats. Scooby and Shaggy. My bad, I said. Did this old man put them there? Dee asked, because this is some old-ass garbage, and those are recently dead. Maybe whatever ate them dragged them here, plus want me to remove them. I asked, but didn't wait for his response. As I went to bag up the cats, we heard something skitter on the floor behind us. We both turned around, and a few trash bags rolled off a pile and spilled on the floor. If there is actually a fucking lion in here, I swear to God, I whispered. Shh, Dee said, his eyes scanning the room. We both looked around for the source of the noise, but didn't see anything. I was about to say something when we heard more scrambling off to our left. I rushed over, moved away a few bags, and let out a terrified, high-pitched scream. After the initial shock, I started laughing. What? Dee asked. I reached down and pulled up a beat-up Jester doll buried in the stacks. Its porcelain face had split down the middle at some point, and the left side was gone. The right side's painted face had worn away with time and exposure to garbage juice, but one unblinking eye stared out at us. Its long limbs hung toward the ground, hunched over like it had a bad back. Who would want this? I asked. Weird fucking hoarders, we heard skittering again, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a massive rat run from under some old cardboard boxes and back towards the bedrooms. I dropped the doll and chased after it, but it was gone before I could do anything. Dee shook his head. Be careful when we're grabbing shit, he said. Those things will take off the tip of your fingers. I grabbed the doll and propped it up on the pile of trash so it looked like it was sitting on a throne of garbage. I'll hire the jester to look out for us. It needs a name. What about Trashly? As soon as I said it, the doll's heavy limbs made it slump to its side. Dee laughed. Trashly already sleeping on the job. We went back to work. We set about clearing out the living room and kitchen before we moved on to the closets and pantries in those rooms. Closets were the worst part of a hoarder's home. They crammed closets full of the weirdest shit known to man. Once, we pulled 8 taxidermied animals out of a living room closet. It was a nativity scene. Baby Jesus was a stuffed dormouse. We played rock, paper, scissors, and he lost. He had one closet duty. I set back to clearing out the living room, leading towards the hallway, and let Dee work on the closet. Dee had moved out 3 garbage bags when I heard him yell and fall out of the closet. I ran over to him as he was scooting away from the closet door. He was genuinely spooked. I helped him up and asked him what happened. It took him a second to put his thoughts together. Something touched me. What? I swear to God, man. Something reached out and touched my hand. It was probably I said before he cut me off. Bitch, I know what a hand feels like. A fucking hand touched my arm. Okay, I said. Gonna let the bitch comment slide. My bad, man, he said, shaking his head. But that shit ain't never fucking happened to me before. You got a flashlight? Let's take a look in the truck, he said. I'll go grab it. He left, and I shook my head. I was working under the belief that he had touched a rat's tail or something. Rats loved the stink of trash, but people tended to avoid it. The smell in this place would keep Oscar the Grouch at arm's length. From behind me, I heard the rats scrambling around. I went over to where I had heard the noise, but didn't see anything. Dee came back into the house and saw me looking for the rat. Heard something? He asked. I think we may have a few friends watching us, I said, glancing through the garbage piles. Can I see that flashlight? He handed it to me, and I shined the beam into the sea of living room trash bags. Nothing jumped out at me, so I assumed the rats were adept at hiding from humans. Something did catch my eye, though Trashly. The doll wasn't in the place where I had left it. Maybe it had fallen during the closet panic, and I hadn't noticed. I plucked up the doll again. It might have been our jester friend here, I said, and not the rats. I don't like the doll, Dee said. Reminds me of Poltergeist, the fucking clown thing. Man, that messed me up good. Maybe we should put a tracker on it, I joked. Dee didn't laugh. Good idea. He eyed something on the ground and grabbed it. Put this on it. He handed me an old cat collar with a little bell on it. I gave him a look, but he insisted. I dutifully put it around Trashly's neck and gave it a shake. The bell jingled, and Dee looked satisfied. I put Trashly back on the trash pile throne and handed Dee back the flashlight. Let's go see about your closet hand. I walked over and pulled the closet door back open. Hey, I said to the potential person in the closet, we're going to empty the closet. If you want to get out of here without the 2 of us stomping you, I'd leave now. Nothing happened. I wasn't surprised. It's not that I doubted Dee, if anything. The dude was honest to a fault, but the story was so far-fetched. There's no way anyone could be in there. But still, Dee is honest. If he felt a hand, he might have felt a hand. You gonna feel around in there or what? He asked me. I said let's look, You gotta feel too. I felt. I didn't agree to that, I protested. Neither did I. But here we are, he said. Don't make me pull rank. I wasn't going to win. The only thing left to do would be to stick my arm into the garbage closet, hoping that a phantom hand wouldn't grab my arm. What the fuck even was this job? Dee shined the light into the darkness. 2 bags fell and split open on the floor. One was filled with maggots. I looked back at Dee. If I'm sticking my hand in there, you're picking up the creepy crawlies. Fine, he said. Now, come on, man. Let's do this. I sighed and reached into the closet. It was packed with smelly garbage bags, and the old owner had also heaped in a bunch of raggedy blankets to fill the gaps between the bags. I slid my arm into a tar black opening and felt around in the darkness. How long do I need to feel around for a hand? Bro, just do me a solid, huh? I need to know I'm not crazy. I pushed my arm deeper into the hole and felt around the trash bags. I half expected Dee to laugh and tell me this was some elaborate prank he was pulling. But when I glanced back at him, he intently watched me. There was real fear in his eyes, a thing I didn't think I'd ever see out of him. I don't think. My hand brushed against something long and pointy, like a finger. My eyes bugged open because Dee ran closer with the flashlight. You feel it, don't you? I did feel it. It was a hand. I reached around, found the wrist, and pulled as hard as possible. All the bags around me started to roll, and before I knew it, my force sent me falling back on my ass. The rank garbage rained all over me, but I still held onto that arm. I pushed the bags off myself, maggots landing on my face and hair, and stood up. Dee dropped the flashlight and was doubled over with laughter. I looked down at my hand and saw why. I was holding an arm, but it didn't belong to a man or some creature. It was a mannequin arm. I threw it down with disgust and shook all the creepy crawlies off me. Dee had dropped to the floor, barely able to breathe. I was hot. This job was bad enough, and now this? Did you fucking know it was a mannequin arm? I swear I didn't, man. But that shit is funny as fuck. Dee has the kind of laugh that can bring anyone around to join him. Not long after, I fell under the spell of his piper chuckles. I threw the arm at him, and he caught it. He helped me off the ground and apologized between the laughs. He patted my back with the arm and started cracking up again. I hurled the arm across the room. That's when we heard Trashy's bells ringing. We looked to where I had left the jester, but it wasn't there anymore. Dee and I locked eyes. We both wanted to speak, but found our ability to do so gone as if we had violated an agreement with Ursula, the sea witch. We heard the little bell jingling again, this time coming from one of the back rooms. How was all Dee could push out. Rats, I said. Has to be. Why are the rats taking the doll? Boom. The closet door behind us slammed shut. We both jumped, and when Dee's feet hit the ground, he sprinted out the front door. I wanted to join him, but I caught a shadow moving along the wall leading to the kitchen and turned to it. In my peripheral vision, it looked like something with long limbs skulking into the kitchen. The bell started ringing again. It was still in the bedrooms. Hello, I called out. Nobody answered. I took a step toward the crowded hallway that led to the back bedrooms. Is anyone there? This time, there was the sound of something moving in the kitchen. Unlike the quick skittering we had heard previously, this was someone moving slowly and deliberately. Someone trying not to make any noise. They were either trying to hide from me or stalk me. Neither idea sparked joy. Bro, I'm sorry, Dee said, peering in from the front door. I didn't mean to run away like a little kid, man. I turned to him and put my fingers to my lips to shush him. He nodded, and I pointed toward the kitchen. He warily inched back into the house, whipping his head around to see if anything around him was out of the ordinary. Feeling assured he was safe, he crept in but kept the flashlight in his hand, cocked and ready to swing. The bell started dinging again in the back room. I pointed towards myself and then the back rooms. Dee nodded, but he wasn't going to join me back there. I wasn't even sure I could make my way back there as quietly as I wanted. There was a small path between the piles of trash, and I was too big for it. I was sure I'd make a racket cutting through, giving whoever was back there a fair warning that someone was coming. Regardless, I was going to try. As I took my first step, we heard something moving in the kitchen again. This time, Dee saw the same shadow I had. He mimicked to me that he thought a man was in there and that he was going to head that way. I delayed my trip to the back bedrooms and hung back just in case he needed some help. Still, after the adrenaline of the moment passed, I had second thoughts about going to the back bedrooms alone. It seemed like the kind of decision a dumb character would make in a slasher movie. I may not be smart, but I ain't that dumb either. I quietly stepped toward the kitchen, flanking Dee as he approached. We heard the cabinet doors open and slam close. There was more movement on the floor as well. It sounded like more than one rat. Then the strangest noise came out of there, the jingling of a bell. Someone threw a trash bag toward the living room as we stood there. It landed with a wet splat and spilled the rotten innards across the floor. The food in the bag was so old it had melted into a putrid black ooze. It sprayed onto Dee's pants. "You about to get fucked up," Dee yelled. He rushed into the kitchen, flashlight held high, ready to crown the bag tosser. I ran behind him, believing a show of force might deter whoever was in there. But when we entered the room, there wasn't a person in there. We saw 2 rats running along the counters, but no lanky-limbed person. The rats squealed, dove into the trash pile, and disappeared from our view. Dee looked over at me and shook his head. "There was someone in here, man. Those damn rats didn't throw that bag. Can I help you, gentlemen?" Came a voice from the front door. Dee and I turned to see a nicely dressed middle-aged white guy standing there. His fake but friendly smile was plastered on his face and didn't present any immediate threat. With this job, you always get looky-loos who want to see how demented their neighbor had been, but they rarely walk into the house. Considering everything that had happened up to this point, the Pope could show up, and we'd be leery. "You can't be in here, man," Dee said. "I'm always here," the man said. "Well, then your streak ends today," Dee said, keeping calm. "This is a job site now and isn't safe for the general public." The man started laughing. "I'm not the general public. Did you know the man that lived here?" I asked. "In a sense." "I watched him for years," the stranger said. "He made many poor decisions." "Strange person. Well, he's not even a person anymore," Dee said, his tone shifting. "He's passed on and left us this mess to clean up. Since we're in control of the site, we can ask you to leave. If you get hurt, we can get sued. If we get sued, I get fired. I get fired. My landlord kicks me out of my place, and I have to live in my car. Since I'm not trying to live out of my beater, you have to go, sir. You live off Baltimore Avenue, right?" Dee's face dropped. He did live near there, but how did this guy know that? Dee squared up and took a more aggressive posture. "Who are you?" Dee asked. "You work with Pete?" "I know Pete," he said, "but he's never met me. What the hell does that mean?" "Yeah," I said, "you're speaking in riddles. Just tell us who you are and what you want." Before the man could speak, we heard Trashley's bell jingling again. This time, it was coming from inside the kitchen despite my having heard it in the back bedroom just minutes earlier. How did it get into the kitchen? Dee and I turned back and saw a rat run across the floor with a cat collar around its neck. Was that the collar on Trashley? I asked. Yeah, Dee said. We heard the jingling as the rat dove into the sea of trash bags and disappeared from sight. Then it went quiet again. Where is the doll? I asked. We returned to where the stranger had been standing, but he was gone. I glanced back toward the front door and saw it swinging on its hinges. I looked at Dee and shrugged. As weird as that dude was, he was gone now. Who the fuck was that? How did he know where I lived? Dee said, "What the hell is going on, man?" There was more jingling in the kitchen again. We turned away from the open front door and back to the noise. Dee and I entered the garbage-stuffed room and scanned for the bell's location. It rang a few more times but stopped as suddenly as it started. I elbowed Dee in the ribs and nodded at the kitchen window. It was mostly covered with old shoe boxes and a ratty old curtain, but you could see shadows moving outside. We saw the stranger pass by the window, heading toward the back door. We waited a beat, and then the door handle started shaking like he was trying to get in. The door must have been locked because he didn't open it. Dee was beginning to get frustrated and yelled out, "Hey man, you gotta get the fuck out now." Okay. The man stopped but didn't walk away. You could still see him outside in the curtain. Dee, thoroughly annoyed at this point, marched through the trash and ripped open the curtain on the back door. Instead of seeing the man standing there, though, we saw nothing but the waist-high grass in the backyard. What the? Dee mumbled and let go of the curtain. You could see the stranger's outline again when it swung back into place. I audibly gasped, and he grabbed the curtain and yanked it away again. Again, there was nothing but grass waving in the breeze. How? I said. Before Dee could respond, one of the cabinet doors swung open, and Trashley spilled out. The doll landed with a thud on the counter. We watched the lifeless ragdoll as it lay on the ugly formica and waited for it to move again. As if it read our thoughts, the doll's left arm fell and dangled off the edge. That was enough to drive us both out of the kitchen. As we returned to the living room, the front door opened again. The stranger had come back. Dee walked up to him and got into the man's face. I ran over and put an arm on Dee's shoulder, but he shrugged me off. "Who the hell are you, man? What are you doing here?" "I came to check on this place and see if things were in order." "You two seem to be the perfect men for the job. Did Pete send you?" I asked. "Did you know the guy that owned this place?" "He was one of the people we monitored. He was meddling with things beyond his control, and he paid for that curiosity. You killed him?" "No, he awakened something he shouldn't have. He paid for that decision. I came to witness this." "Witness what?" "Maybe we should call Pete," I said. "Get this straightened out." "I didn't know dolls could stand like that," the stranger said, pointing toward the kitchen. We both snapped our heads back toward the kitchen and saw Trashley standing tall on its thin fabric legs. It didn't move, but it was clear it had moved at some point. It was in a small pile on the counter when we last saw it. The whole energy in the house had changed in an unnatural direction, like seeing watch hands run backward. Dee's eyes were so wide, I was afraid they'd pop out. He was gripping the flashlight so tight I thought he might shatter it. Drops of sweat formed on his bald head and rolled down his face. He wasn't a tiny man, and I was worried these scares might cause his heart to stop. Confusion is too weak a word to describe what we felt in the moment. Befuddlement, maybe like discovering there had been aliens on Earth this whole time, and your boss was one of them. As we stared, the stranger said, "I think now you have a real mess on your hands. I think I'm about to beat your ass," Dee said, turning to confront the man, but not finding him standing there. What the hell? Where did he go? There was a rumble of thunder, and it shook the house. Dee and I both ducked like something was going to fall on us. I felt the thunderclap's vibrations in my guts. I glanced at the windows and noticed the sun still peeking through the edges of the blackout curtains. There were no clouds overhead, and I realized that the thunderclap didn't come from above us, but from below. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words died in my throat when we heard something knocking inside the closed closet door. It was quiet initially, but each successive thump was louder than the last. Soon, the knocks were so loud and so violent, the doorknob rattled with each rap. I glanced back into the kitchen. The jester was gone. It had either fallen behind some of the bags or had moved away. Neither option made me feel too good. If this thing could skulk through the trash without making a sound, it could sneak right up behind us without us knowing. I didn't know if it was violent, and I had no intention of finding out, but the thought nested in my brain and set up shop. Dee, the doll is gone. Man, fuck this place, he said, nodding toward the door. Let's get the hell out of here. Best idea I've heard today, I said, heading toward the door. Dee got there first, and when he grabbed the handle, he let out a painful yelp. I didn't need to ask what happened because I had heard the sizzle. He pulled his hand back, and the mark had already reddened and started to swell. What the hell? He said, blowing on his hand as if his breath would cure it. The knocking in the closet started up again. It was loud from the jump, but the noise that bothered me was hearing the doorknob turn and the closet door squeak open. I ran out of the vestibule and back into the living room to discover the jester hanging from the handle. Its half face was turned up into a crooked smile. Dee, I said, my voice trailing. He walked over to me, and when he saw trashily hanging from the door, all the blood ran from his face. Hello, I offered to the open door. Nothing but silence was coming from the closet. I was happy for the silence. Loved every sweet second of it. Maybe it meant that all this hoodoo voodoo shit was over, and we could get back to normal. It wasn't over. The closet door flew open, sending the jester doll flying into the kitchen and out of sight. We heard something breathing inside the darkness of the closet. Across the living room, there was a movement in the trash piles. I looked over to see the mannequin hand flying through the air and back into the closet. We gotta go, I said. Dee slapped at the front door handle again, which was still hot. He shook his head. I can't go this way. We burst back into the living room and heard more rumbling from the closet. Keeping a wide berth, we stayed away from the closet and eyed the back door in the kitchen. Before we could step in that direction, there was another bone-shaking thunderclap. This time, though, all the piles of trash from the back bedrooms flooded into the living room and created a wall of garbage blocking access to the back of the house. There was a growl from the closet, and we both looked over and saw that mannequin's hand reach out and grip the door frame. Whatever was in there had attached the arm to its body and was pulling into the living room. That was our signal to get the hell out. We turned to run, and all of the kitchen trash rushed forward. Like the backroom trash, the bags formed a wall trapping us inside the living room. There was another growl from the closet, and a second arm reached out and grabbed the door frame. This arm looked organic, but not well. The flesh was gray and ripped. You could see muscles and bones as the arm flexed on the door. Fuck this, Dee said. He ran at the wall of trash blocking the kitchen and threw his whole massive frame into it. Like the cool aid man, he burst through and landed with a thud on the filthy floor. His plan worked, and even though he was covered in foul-smelling shit juice and in a living nightmare, he turned back to me with a smile so wide you would have thought he'd just won the Powerball. The smile quickly faded. From the top of the refrigerator, trashily uncoiled like a spring and launched itself at Dee with an old rusty knife in its tiny hands. It landed with a chaotic thud, but quickly scrambled to its feet and sunk the blade into Dee's calves. Dee screamed, but the doll just kept slashing at his legs. Blood was pouring out of a dozen wounds and mixing in with the rotten garbage on the floor. Dee tried grabbing the jester, but it quickly jabbed the knife forward and clean through Dee's hand. It tried pulling the blade out, but was stuck on the gristle and tendons. I leaped through the wall and landed on the slick floor like Bambi, stepping on ice. Unlike the deer, though, I kept my balance. Dee screamed at me to help him. I took one good step and booted trashily in the face, sending it violently flying across the room. It landed against the stove like the ragdoll it was, and I heard its porcelain face crack even further. I reached down and pulled Dee up. He screamed in pain, and blood was gushing from his wounds, but he knew enough to get to stepping. There was a roar from the closet, and I peeked over my shoulder long enough to see a set of bull horns trying to wedge through the narrow closet door. "We gotta move," I said, shouldering Dee's weight under my own. He was struggling to walk, and the pain was exquisite, but to his credit, he was not letting the oozing wounds slow him down. I'm convinced he would have just ripped that leg off at the knee and hobbled out the door if he could have. We got to the back door, and I slapped at the handle. Like the front door, it was hot as well. I looked around for anything to cover my hand and spied an old rag in a nearby trash bag. With my free hand, I ripped it open and grabbed the rag. It was wet and smelled like death, but I didn't care. I touched the rag to the handle. It sizzled, and I could still feel the intense heat on my skin, but it worked well enough to try to open the door. The handle wouldn't budge. I dropped the rag and tried to boot the door open, but all that did was send pain up my leg and back. I swore, but it was drowned out by the crashing coming from the living room. I glanced back and saw the closet door frame being ripped from the walls. "Look out!" Dee yelled. I turned in time to see Trashly leaping through the air with a fork in their hands. It landed on my leg and sunk the fork's tines into the back of my knee. I screamed in pain and lost my footing, sending both Dee and I to the ground. I had collapsed onto the doll and could feel it jabbing my shoulders with the fork. I sat up, and the jester leapt for my face. Dee, without hesitation, plucked the doll out of the air like he was snagging a line drive. In one fluid motion, he turned and hurled it hard against the stove again. I scrambled to my feet, my knees burning, and tried to bash the door open. I hit it 3 times as hard as my body could handle, and all I did was damage my shoulder. I went to slam into it a 4th time when I felt Dee's hand grab the waist of my pants and yank me down. I landed hard on top of him, but he didn't mind. As I slammed into his chest, I turned to see Trashly grab the bottom of the stove with its stringy felt arms and easily lift it off the ground. With the ease of an ace pitcher hurling a fastball, the doll threw the stove in our direction. My old duck and cover drills came into practice, and I covered my neck and head as the stove flew over our bodies. The stove slammed into the back door, cracking it in half and knocking it off its hinges. Daylight streamed in, and our salvation was a mere few feet away. I could see our way out to freedom, but it was just an oasis. The stove bounced off the wall, nicked my back, and landed square on Dee's right arm. It shattered under the weight. He let out a scream like a wounded wild animal. The way we were tangled up sent his painful hollering directly into my ear. He thrashed under me, trying to get away from the weight of the stove, but was only making the break worse. I rolled off of him, grabbed the stove, and pushed it off his mangled arm. I reached down and helped Dee up, but he could barely move. I was afraid he was in shock, and if we lingered any longer, the thing pulling itself out of the closet would be out and after us. I didn't know what it had planned for us, but I didn't think it would invite us to a potluck or anything. I know it hurts, bro, but we have to. Then I smelled the gas. I looked over to where the stove had been and saw the telltale wavy vision of leaking gas. At that moment, like divine inspiration, a plan came to me. I reached into my pocket and found my lighter. "I can't move," Dee said. "Just leave me, man. Told you I wasn't a bitch," I said. "Give me 20 feet of hustle, and I can get us out of this mess." I showed him the lighter, and he knew the plan. Dee nodded, gritted his teeth, and leaned his weight on me. He was in so much pain, but he bit his lip and moved. I spied an old paper towel roll and grabbed it in my free hand. I managed to help Dee get out of the house and walked him about 15 feet into the backyard. I placed him on the ground. He grabbed his arm and let out a whimper, but didn't want to slow me down. "Take cover," I said, and he scooted away. I headed back to the house, but he called my name. I turned and saw his painful, sweaty face. "Toast these motherfuckers," he spat out. I nodded and headed back toward the house. I held the paper towel roll firmly and pulled out my lighter. I didn't know how fast the gas would ignite, but I knew I wouldn't be able to dawdle. I also realized this might be the last thing I ever did, but I was okay with that decision. It was worth it if I could send these two things back to hell. When I got to the door, the smell of gas was strong. This entire house was an accelerant, and everything would light up like a city's 4th of July celebration. I stepped inside, and it was surprisingly quiet. I looked over at where the closet door had been and only saw a massive hole. The thing had gotten out, but I didn't know where or how it was hiding. When I turned my attention back to the gas, I saw the jester. It was standing on the counter. As soon as I turned, it leaped at me. It landed on my neck and coiled its limbs around it like an anaconda. I struggled to breathe and fought with everything I had left in the tank. The jester's hands, previously soft and cotton-filled, were now tipped with razor-sharp claws. It raked those Kruger-esque daggers across my face. Blood gushed from my wounds and dripped into my eyes, blurring my vision. I screamed and pulled as hard as I could, but this little monster was Velcroed to my body. I had dropped the lighter and paper towel roll in the struggle, but that was a secondary concern. I needed to get free before attempting to light this place up. I felt the doll's legs growing as it tried to wrap up my arms. I was face to face with its blinking, drawn-on eye. It opened its half-mouth, and inside was row upon row of porcelain daggers. It lunged for my face to bite my cheek, but I held it off as best as I could. The arms around my neck started to tighten, and around the edges of my eyes, the world began to dim. I was afraid I was done for. I felt my knees buckle, and I fell onto my back. The black edges of the vision were starting to tunnel. I had seconds to do something, or I'd be toast myself. I moved my thumbs under the jester's tightening arms and pushed with all my might. At first, it didn't budge, but then I felt the pressure lessen and could breathe again. "Fuck you," I spat and funneled all my stored-up anger and resentment and strength into pushing this little clingy bitch off me. It snapped at my hands and caught my knuckles, but I kept going until its spindly arms were off my throat. I ripped its legs off my body and threw the jester right towards the gas leak. It crashed against the wall, its half-face shattering on impact. I searched around for my lighter and found it. I flicked the spark wheel so hard I feared it'd break. There were a few sparks, but nothing caught. I urged it on, taking a peek at where the monster was. As I looked up, I saw the jester's new face. The porcelain had broken away to reveal a red and black pulsating mass of muscle, blood, and gore that dripped from the wound. There was a bellow from the living room, and a massive creature that looked strikingly like a minotaur, albeit with one mannequin arm, came stomping into view. It must have sensed my presence because it roared again and charged at the wall. The wall shuddered and cracked but held for the time being. I knew it had come down easy the next time it ran at the wall. I was running out of time. I pressed my thumb down hard on the spark wheel and gave it a skin-ripping spin. It worked. There was finally a dancing orange flame at the edge of the bick. I held it against the paper towel roll and waited for it to catch. The wait felt painstakingly long. The Minotaur bellowed again and slammed into the wall. Its massive head came through. I looked at the jester, getting down in a crouch to leap at me again. Light, goddammit, light, I screamed. The temperature finally hit 451 degrees, and the flame transferred from the lighter to the towel roll. I threw the roll at the jester as it took to the air. The roll hit him, and the impact sent them both to the floor. They landed right near the gas line. I managed to get about 7 feet outside before the flame caught the gas and sent the entire house sky high. My body was thrown like a rag doll 20 feet into the neighbor's backyard. I landed on my shoulder with a sickening thud and blacked out. Hours later, I woke up in a hospital room. A dozen or so machines around me were beeping and keeping me going. Pain racked my entire body, and each breath was a world of discomfort I'd never been to before. But I was alive. Officially, the cause of the explosion was a gas leak. The fire department said it might have been leaking for years, but it was hard to determine because of all the stuff crammed into the home. Dee was in the hospital for about 2 weeks before being released. I was stuck for a few more weeks, as the explosion had rocked my brain and gave me post-concussion symptoms. We shared a smoke outside on Dee's last day in the hospital. We talked about what happened and thought it best not to be totally honest with everyone. This was mainly because we were sure everyone hadn't been honest with us, especially Pete. The stranger had name-dropped him specifically, and Pete acted very strangely in the explosion's aftermath. He was surprised we had survived and asked a lot of odd questions, some of which seemed to suggest he knew more than he was letting on. Dee has slyly started looking for a new job, and I'll follow him when I get out. I'm counting down the days not only because I'm sick of hospital food, but also because I don't feel safe here. Pete keeps popping in, and I swear I saw the stranger hanging around the lobby. But what really concerns me and makes me think I might not make it out of here is what happened last night. At about 3 in the morning, when everyone on the floor was sleeping, I heard a bell jingling in the corridor outside my room. When I went out to look, I saw the shadow of a short, long-limbed person turn the corner and disappear.